In the grim darkness of the far future, there can be only war. It's a bit of a strange sales pitch. This one line describing the dystopian sci-fi setting of Warhammer. From this sentence, the term grimdark evolved, thrown around when describing something dystopian, gritty, grim, and dark, even if it isn't Warhammer. But what is the grimdark style, and when it comes to miniatures, can anything be painted grimdark? Even this anime miniature? It's a great miniature from Infinity, but it's kind of cute and flowery. Can we figure out what grimdark is and apply it to anything? Let's find out. My name is Alex and welcome to 52 Miniatures. First, we need to talk about what grimdark is. For some, it might be the fact that the only tea around is yellow label and the milk comes in freeze-dried powder form. Very dystopian future. Or the fact that you decided to paint miniatures in a hotel room while traveling, and because you don't know what grimdark is, you brought all the little single pigment paint bottles, and now the realization is dawning on you that you will have to mix a lot of paint to get the colors you want. But for most, it does of course circle back to Warhammer. I found this piece of text in a Warhammer 40k book. West of Urbitane, the slum tracts begin, and one descends into a ragged wilderness of dispiriting ruins where the only signs of life are the armored manses of the narco barons, projecting like metal blisters above the endless rubble. Wikipedia says grimdark is a particularly dystopian, amoral and violent setting. A rebellion against high fantasy, i.e. rebelling against Lord of the Rings type stuff. Heroes replaced by anti-heroes, and doing the right thing is pretty much impossible. Futile. Again, stressing the point, the violence bit is a very big part of the grimdark. Games Workshop, the creators of Warhammer, were not the only ones doing it at the time. The grim tales reverberated among the disillusioned. A very big gun and an angry face model sold a lot better than the model portraying a kind-hearted hobbit with a frying pan. Makes me think of the diorama I once made of a space marine shooting Bilbo Baggins in the chest is maybe one of the most grim-dark tributes I've accomplished. But what about visually then? I think of grimdark as the opposite of a fairy tale prince. Dents, rust, dirt, grime, blood. What the prince actually would look like after a fight with a dragon. To then go on to murdering the king, because that is the simple way of taking over the kingdom and saves having to marry some child girl. Besides, it's better to sell her to the slavers. Real good price on princesses nowadays. And that's the mood I'm looking for. Can I paint that mood? I wonder if the rather common pale, bloody, dark brown, grimy, grimdark look comes from the fact that many that are into Warhammer can't quite see their vision in the official painted miniatures. Most of the official stuff looks new and shiny, almost heroic. For real. But the stories tell of the opposite, and many have grown to love that opposite. That was the punk. So things like Trench Crusade pop up in the vacuum left behind when the corporates of Games Workshop forgot about the roots of it all, now rotting somewhere underneath the new shiny factory making Space Marine plush toys. But is it enough to just paint some dirt and rust? And what about colours? And does there have to be blood? And can I paint something completely non-Warhammer and make it look grimdark? Or are there rules? Why don't you tell me by the end of this video in the comments down below if you think I've painted grimdark or not. I'm partial to the heraldry look. It's very grimdark to me, a return to the medieval, much like Warhammer 40k visuals imply. I just think it does fit. The unnoble knight, the paradox. So does the industrial. The feeling of crude machines and mechanics removes the hope of a glorious future. Also, something that glows, menacing eyes, a dim moody light, or powerful pulsing weapons. My painting today is going to be a hunt. I'm trying to be pretty open-minded about where to take things. I haven't practiced what I'm about to do, and I'm trying to not limit the experience just because you're watching. So don't expect too much of a linear step-by-step painting guide. Today is not tutorial day. And I mean, there's nothing remotely grimdark about a step-by-step tutorial. Anyway, I started with a Zenithal Prime to give me a visual representation where to paint shadows, highlights, and so on. The model is a Beast Hunters Free Guild from Infinity. To be clear, it's been sent to me for free by Oskar Pelle, the company behind Infinity. The official paint job is rather circus-themed, and I figured she deserved something else. The base was scratch-built, based around some surplus warhammer bits, a gun for a dreadnought turned into some kind of sci-fi rubble. Cork bark and various bits I keep in my basing box. Remember the endless rubble of Urbitane. I tried real hard to add some skulls to the base. It's the most obvious grimdark trick. Just add a pile of skulls. But that also kind of felt like cheating, so I resisted that particular decapitation temptation. A lot of my color choices are going to come out of Enki Bilal's Nikopol Trilogy, its favorite visuals. I'm not only talking about the blue nipples, French grimdark that perhaps. I can't say if this is all just general dystopianism or if we can label this as grimdark. But as color inspiration for miniatures with a dystopian look, I love it. The glowing orb and sword got off to a pink start. I really wanted to make that pink work, but it was giving me a headache and a twitching eye. So I changed it to a suitable sci-fi blue. With the colors sketched out, the heraldry-type stripes, the mechanical yellow arm, the glowing orb, all the different building blocks of my grimdark vision, I proceeded to shading. The model should be dark and contrast-rich, so I blacklined, painting thin lines of black in every crevice, pretty much, and then moved on to a weird burgundy shadow, still after that pink vibe. But also, the almost dried blood red might possibly work as a shading for all the colors, as well as add a sort of mysterious sensation. Blood by association. For me, the grimdark is a mood, so I'm trying to rely on mood rather than rely on logic. My mind was telling me this red stuff in the shaded areas was looking appropriate, so I just let it happen, not worrying about why or about the coming steps. I was rather just cherishing the now. And then it was time to leave the grimdark hotel. I took the shortcut through the servo skull-haunted forest and barely arrived home some time later. Here, I started defining details and highlights, applying color that might previously have been tinted too far into dried blood red territory, as well as start working on the light emitted from the orb and the sword, a light that unfortunately started to conflict with my 80s ceramic toilet green, featured on the arm and clothing. Painting light like this is always tricky, essentially going from almost white to some mid-tone color, in this case the blue. But getting that gradient going to create a feel of light being emitted and reflected is for me mostly based on repeatedly redoing things until it looks okay. Now brace yourself for a little practice break. Mix your own skin tones. It's a great place to start getting into mixing paints. One needs yellow, red, blue, black, and white. The red and yellow makes orange, and orange is in fact pretty much a very saturated brown. Just by adding black or blue to that, you make brown. Adding white makes brighter brown. And this can be tinted to more of a pinkish skin by adding red. Add more blue to get a dramatic cool tone. I use magenta and yellow oxide as my red and yellow because I think this makes me look cool. Now the best bit is I start in the middle and I mix my main skin tone. And for the brighter shades I add more white and yellow, and to the darker I add more red and blue, giving me more cool violet shadows and slightly warmer highlights. And the same paints can be mixed to create any humanoid skin tone regardless of planetary origin. Aware that the model actually probably isn't showing skin, instead tight clothing, I felt skin and grimdark somehow kind of resonates. Then, inspired by both the drawings of Enki Bilal as well as the box art, I wanted some vibrant red on the white face mask. I presume both previously mentioned are in turn inspired by kabuki face paint. Mine, just a straight line across the face, again maybe flirts a bit more with the heraldic or low-tech warning stripes. Most things are now in place, but we need the wear and tear and dirt. I can't really see a grimdark paint job without it. For this, I will rely on sponge chipping. Dipping a little piece of sponge in rather thin dark brown paint, then delicately stippled on around the edges of the parts of the model that most likely would get worn and chipped. The sponge creates a random but very chip-like mark that on this scale looks like the paint is chipped off to reveal the surface underneath. This I can then enhance by painting on some edge outlines, as well as add some scratches made by thin lines of brighter paint. I use the same paint to add scratches or fiber texture to the cloth or skirt or kimono. I think this is about practicing some fearlessness. I put in a lot of time into that cloth, painting stripes, adding shading, getting the right feel, and then to blatantly go in and paint little lines over everything takes a bit of getting used to. So does using the sponge again to stipple on dirt stains. But I mean, this is quite necessary to fulfill my vision. And by the way, I have been enjoying doing all this with just acrylic paint. Often I use oils, enamels, dry pigment powders to get towards similar results. Now the base needed a bit of that glow effect as well. Is it just me that hangs grimdark up on a glow effect? Perhaps. There's something hopeless about a dim light in the dark, like The Little Match Girl by H.C. Andersen. On a freezing New Year's Eve, a poor young girl, shivering, bareheaded and barefoot, unsuccessfully tries to sell matches in the street. Afraid to go home because her father would beat her for failing to sell any matches, she huddles in the alley between two houses and lights the matches, one after the other, to warm herself. In the flame of the matches, she sees a series of comforting visions, a warm iron stove, a lovely roasted goose, a great glorious Christmas tree, finally her kind grandmother. Each vision disappears as the match burns down. After the final match burns out, the girl freezes to death in the cold weather. I left out some bits about stars and more elaborate visions about the grandmother, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't really make this story any less grim. And this story has a Danish origin, but funnily enough has been interpreted in anime quite a bit. And so with that, I'll leave you. I think my model maybe looks a bit more set for survival than the girl with the matches. But who knows, maybe that orb is her last match. Thank you for watching. Please join my Patreon to support the creation of videos like this one. Bye.